There's a lot of old school advice swirling around relationships that just doesn't hold up anymore, like the idea that compromise is the be all, end all, right? Instead,
Mm,
we're talking about recognizing when to bend and when to stand your ground.
exactly. That nuance is crucial. It's not about sacrificing everything, but setting a creative equilibrium. What do you think of that approach?
It really reframes compromise. Instead of both partners just giving up a little bit, there's this method based on Dr. Gottman's art of compromise that gets you to sort out what each person is flexible about versus what's a non negotiable dream. That way,
Yeah,
you're honoring each other's core values.
right. It sort of transforms compromise into an exercise in mutual respect and creativity. Now, speaking of transformation, what's your take on the idea that open communication is the key?
Oh man, that's a biggie too. The traditional view is like, speak your truth all the time. But the truth is, it matters when you speak. It's like, you really need to check in. Is it a good time? Is your partner in the right headspace? Otherwise,
Mm.
it might just come off as, overwhelming.
So it's more about intentional timing rather than a free-for-all conversation marathon. That's interesting.
Exactly. You might be tempted to share everything immediately, but if you dump that on someone when they're, like, right in the middle of work or winding down, it just doesn't land. And, our ability for critical thinking can really wane as the day goes on.
Yeah, kind of like how our brains run low on gas by late evening, huh?
Precisely. And then there's the myth about never go to bed angry. I mean, it sounds noble, but realistically, our minds have made, tens of thousands of decisions through the day. So locking in a heavy discussion right before sleep might do more harm than good.
I see what you mean. Sometimes it's just better to, hit pause and pick it up when you're both refreshed.
Exactly. Scheduling a concrete time to talk the next day can be way more productive. It's like, updating your relationship software overnight rather than forcing a bug fix in the dead of night.
Yeah, that's a clever analogy. And what about that common don't sweat the small stuff mantra? It almost feels like it dismisses genuine feelings.
Right. Um, don't sweat the small stuff can sometimes mean ignoring those little signals that something deeper might be going on. If one person seems overly emotional and the other seems distant, it might not just be about being
Mm.
sensitive or cold. It could be that they're processing things differently.
So it's more about understanding that our brains work in distinct ways. Like one might compartmentalize, while the other makes widespread connections.
Exactly. And that brings us to what some call the waffle spaghetti dynamic, where those processing differences play a huge part. Instead of brushing it off, if couples embrace these differences, they can actually deepen their connection rather than misinterpret the behavior as a flaw.
That makes sense, though I can see how some might argue it could also be used as an excuse to avoid working on personal growth.
True, I get where you're coming from, but it's less about making excuses and more about, building empathy. Once you realize that differences in thought processes exist, you can talk about them without blame, you know?
Exactly. Absolutely. Now, what about intimacy? There's this pervasive myth that intimacy will just slowly decline over time.
Oh, that's a classic one. People often assume that as time goes on, the spark will, um, fade away. But really, lasting intimacy is something you actively build every day. It's not just a passive state. You have to nurture it with regular mindful efforts.
Mm. Kind of like maintaining a garden. You have to water it regularly or it'll dry out.
Exactly. And it's about building that creative ritual, be it through planned date nights, switching up roles like who plans the adventure, or little surprises that keep the excitement alive. It's a daily
Yeah.
practice.
And then there's the myth that money will break you up. That one always seems to cause a lot of drama in discussions.
Right. But what research shows, and it's fascinating, is that it's really not the money itself, but the negativity bias at play. Dr. Gottman found that in stable relationships, even during conflict, the ratio of positive to negative interactions is something like 5:1. And outside of conflict, it's even higher at
Mm.
21.
That's pretty eye-opening. It really shifts the focus from fighting over money to celebrating small positives to counteract that bias.
Absolutely. Instituting daily rituals where you, for example, share a few things you appreciate about your partner can build a strong, positive framework that might just keep the negativity at bay.
Yeah, seems like so many of these myths are really about rethinking long-held best practices in relationships.
For sure. And speaking of best practices, there's that double myth. You know, the one that says, make sure you talk everything through versus preserve the peace and stop making a fuss. The reality is, different people have different needs. One might need immediate discussion while the other needs space.
So instead of forcing one style onto everyone, it's about agreeing in advance on how to handle conflict, maybe taking a time out with a preset duration.
Exactly. Setting a specific, agreed-upon break, say 20 minutes or even an hour, lets each person cool off while still knowing that resolution is coming soon. That balance between space and connection is key.
Right. And when you finally come back to the conversation, you're much more likely to be, in a better state of mind to actually listen and fix things.
Exactly. It's all part of a healthier communication model. It even goes hand in hand with the myth about never going to bed angry. Remember, it's not about forcing resolution at the wrong time, but rather affirming your ongoing commitment and scheduling the discussion appropriately.
That approach really prioritizes mental clarity and emotional safety versus just buckling down at bedtime.
Absolutely. And embracing these ideas gives couples a sort of software update for their relationships. It's all about using science and time-tested, research-based tools to strengthen connection.
It's impressive how these insights have completely redefined what it means to maintain a healthy relationship. Instead of relying on stale advice, we actually have practical steps.
Right on. And to think, there are even support programs out there, like the Gottman Relationship Advisor and the Gottman Relationship Coach, that apply these methods in a digital, self-paced format, helping couples both assess and improve their dynamics.
Yeah, it almost seems like there's a relationship toolkit now, equipped with the latest research to help couples face everything from communication mishaps to deeper incompatibilities.
Exactly. And that toolkit isn't just theoretical. It's built on a foundation of solid research that reveals, for instance, how structured appreciation rituals and intentional timeouts really work to dilute negativity.
I love how this all comes back to the idea that relationships aren't static. They're dynamic systems that can and should be continuously nurtured.
Precisely. And while some might say that rethinking these myths seems to simplify complex dynamics, I'd argue it empowers individuals to take actionable steps. It's like, moving from a black and white mindset to embracing a full spectrum of possibilities.
Well put. These insights really give couples a roadmap to navigate challenges with a bit more science, creativity, and a lot more heart. Thanks for breaking these down. It's been an enlightening conversation.